Well, it's election eve, November the 2nd. Thought I'd kind of do another kind of pre-election day, if you want to call it that, because after all, it looks like most of the voting has probably occurred before the election this year. Update. So, big picture, I guess, is that, well, the real clear average has dropped a point to what, 6.7% advantage for Biden from what was about 7.9 just a couple, 3 days ago. So things are moving in that direction. The battleground states have shrunk to 2.6% in the real clear politics average. And some of the more friendly to Trump polls are showing him leading in some key states. So the situation here is kind of going beyond a lot of polling. We're really talking about turnout now and actual voting, how voting is going. Now, President Trump is presenting an optimistic viewpoint based on the early voting to date in several states such as Florida and I guess Ohio and Arizona. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. It seems like there's some confirming evidence on that. For instance, I just saw a quick glance at the Miami Herald article online, which said something that yesterday the Democrats finally had a good day, and I'm like, well, all the other days weren't good days. That was designed to be a good day for them, the so-called souls of the polls day. So we'll see what happens on election day, which is when hopefully the rest of the Republicans will get out and do a pretty good job, hopefully. So let's look at the big picture here. Electoral college is what only counts in winning states. And here we have a situation where we have, in the last election, 16, President Trump won 306 electoral votes. But a little caveat, he only got 304 because there were 2 unfaithful electors. So, fortunately, that they didn't vote for Hillary. So, but anyway, we'll get past that real quick. I just want to mention that. So the way I look at it is, let's look at some states in question. Trump is basically counting on, the Democrats talk about their firewall. I guess the Republican equivalent would be the states of Arizona, Texas, and then of course Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, and North Carolina, and Florida, and then also add in Ohio and Iowa. And I hear there's some good polling out in Iowa recently from the Des Moines Register. So if Trump can hold all those states, then you take the 306 and look at the states that would still be highly competitive, which we're looking at primarily are Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and maybe less competitive, but let's just look at those first 3 states. So that's a total of 10 for Wisconsin, 16 for Michigan, and 20 for Pennsylvania electoral votes, which goes up to a total of 46 electoral votes, which you take that from the 306, you get 260 electoral votes. So that's where Trump would be if he can maintain his firewall in states that are always kind of leaning Republican, if the Democrats don't succeed in flipping any of them. Now, there is some concerns are always being raised about that, whether it be Texas or Ohio or whatever. So we're waiting to see how that pans out, but hopefully that doesn't occur this year. And of course, that explains a few of the maneuvers that Biden has made, such as his foray into Georgia and his foray into Ohio. And I guess Kamala Harris's foray into Texas. Okay. So given that, what does it take for Trump to win? Well, basically, he needs to win one of those 3 states. And that if he were to win Wisconsin only, he would have 270 electoral votes won. Now, here's the problem. I mentioned earlier the issue. I'm always worried about the idea of unfaithful electoral votes because, after all, the electors are people, not actual abstract counts. So it would behoove us to get more than that. So the next state would be more reasonable would be Michigan. If he wins Michigan and holds all those other states, he would win the election. And there he'd have 6 extra electoral votes, which should account for any unfaithful electors. And then, of course, Pennsylvania would of course, give him 280. And, of course, then on the other hand, there are other states that we've made minor forays into, such as Minnesota, Nevada, and New Hampshire. And it's possible that, for instance, a Minnesota and a Nevada could make up for a Michigan, hypothetically, or make up for maybe one of the, let's say, a Georgia flipping or something of that sort. So that's kind of the kind of analysis you get into here on this. It looks to me like I sort of think that the best bet is Michigan. It seems like the most probable one for him to win. He has a corresponding Senate candidate in John James, who's also doing pretty competitive there. And it just seems to me like there's less likelihood of hanky-panky. The situation in Pennsylvania, the pollster from Trafalgar has the opinion that up to 5% of the votes there will be fraudulent. That seems to me to be kind of extreme, but then again, never say never. But there are some bad developments there. For some bizarre reason, the Supreme Court has let them get by with some changes to the rules which are really designed to facilitate cheating, which I don't understand quite what that is. I mean, giving them extra time to count the ballots is one thing, but they should insist on the signature verification being done and the postmarks being done by Election Day. Even then, you have to look at the possibility, I guess, of corrupt people in the post office somehow setting the postmark back. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I would think it could be in running them later. I mean, the real risk is if they know how many votes they need, they could create additional votes afterwards. Now, I don't know. Maybe this guy is just a little on the paranoid side, but apparently Pennsylvania is, particularly Philadelphia, is known for voter fraud and suppression. So it is something to look out for. And if there is a major legal battle, that may be where it occurs over those issues. There's other, okay. So that kind of gives you the idea. But that's why I kind of think the Michigan win is probably the one that's the easiest. Not that it's easy, but I mean, it's the one that should be more clean cut, and probably it seems like some polling favors at least stuff like Trafalgar. But the other thing you have to look at is that there is a degree of just kind of a statistical threat thing. Any combination of states that gets him 270 or above would be a win if he can hold all those base states that I mentioned. And the odds on that seem to be good historically, although there are some threats being played in, again, Georgia, I guess. The Texas situation is kind of interesting to me only in that you have 9.7 million votes in exceeding the whole 16 vote already. And now tomorrow's election day where everybody else can come out and vote. There's up to about 16 million registered voters in the state. So it'd be interesting to see how many show up and what inclination all these people have. So that's, that's another one. I think it seems like that's a long shot for the Democrats to pull that off, though. It seems to be. And a lot of the polls we get here, you got Quinnipiac, which says it's a tie, but Quinnipiac, I think, is notoriously biased to the Democrats. And some like the local newspaper polls, which I think they're Democrat newspapers, again, very suspicious of some of those. And Rasmussen's last poll, I think, had Trump ahead by 6 points, with a fair amount of, I think, undecided or something. So, and that was quite a ways back in time, so we don't know, I'm trying to think. That was probably around the time of the first debate. I'm not sure if it was before or after. So that's kind of where we are. I just want to kind of run through those real quick. The other issue would be the 270 scenario. If that actually happens and there is an unfaithful elector, I'm sure there'd be a court challenge to it. And that would lead us up to the question of what the Supreme Court would be likely to do about that. Let's see. If you take the original intent of the original pre-Constitution before the 12th Amendment, I would say the original intent would probably favor the idea of letting the elector do what they want, because that was the original idea of the Electoral College. The original idea was that the Electoral College was just going to be a group of distinguished individuals who would pick the president. They didn't want it to be the Congress, so they didn't want the president being beholden to the Congress, but they kind of didn't want it to be a popular vote either. Well, and they also wanted to represent the states in a way which is a little bit more giving a little bit of extra preference to small states over big states by letting the 2 senators count for electoral votes. Well, then they passed the 12th Amendment, because what the problem with the original system was, you'd have people who are absolute political rivals ending up getting president and vice president. The number 2 person on the original system got vice president. So if you could imagine, let's say, a Donald Trump presidency with Kamala Harris as his vice president. That would be an example of the sort of thing that could have happened on the original system, and actually did. Not that it was anybody like Kamala Harris, but the point is that they were that much of a rival, in a sense, or maybe not that much, but they were definitely rivals. But the point is, okay, but the 12th Amendment created the current system where the electors had to vote for a pair. So essentially, you had to vote for, either Trump and Pence, or you had to vote for Biden and Harris. Okay, so that's the system. And so that was designed to get away from the idea of the electors essentially being their own person to some degree, and to respect the partisanship that exists. So I think the Supreme Court could probably rule either way if that actually happened. I think they're really hoping that doesn't happen, that they even have to get a case like that. The other possibility would be that we have a couple of really crazy little states like Nebraska and Maine, who apportion their electors by congressional district plus two for the whole state. So, for instance, if the congressional district that contains Omaha were to go for Biden, while the rest of the state went for Trump, which is hypothetically possible, then even if he got the 270 under my idea of winning one of the 10 electoral states, and then above his base, if that person defected to Biden, you could end up having a 269 to 269 tie. And that would then throw the thing into the House of Representatives for the president and the Senate for the vice president, which could hypothetically lead to a situation where you would end up with something like, a Biden Pence outcome or a Trump Harris outcome. Little quirk of the system that could occur there. And so that's why I keep saying I kind of hope he manages to get above 270, like at least 276 or something like that. And that would be a very good thing. I don't know what the chances are on Nevada. Some people think that could be in play because of you have a real Democrat lockdown governor, and a lot of the people that the Democrats are counting on are people that really work in the kind of the entertainment and casino industries and so forth out there, who have been sort of put out of work by this whole fiasco. So we don't know. They might either not vote, might have left the state, who knows what they might do. If they do something unusual, that's a possibility. And Minnesota's interesting because of all the riots in Minneapolis. Could hypothetically flip that state or not. But that's another line of thinking there. After all, Trump came very close in the last 16 election in that state, so it is a possibility. But and of course, and I think Pennsylvania is a strong possibility because of the fracking issue. I don't know. Again, I don't know whether to take 5% of the vote being fraudulent. Seems to me to be a bit on the high side. It seems like you have to have a major fraud industry going on to do that. And so we'll have to wait and see on that one. So basically, that's kind of my pre-election roundup here, and we'll just have to see how it all plays out. The Rasmussen poll has it within 1% on the popular vote, which should be good for electoral victory. There is a inconsistency with even their national polls and their state polls. I don't see how you get some of the state numbers they get and then still get the national numbers when you consider the balance of how you'd have to look at, again, big, heavy Democrat states with high popular vote majorities for Biden, figuring into the national totals. But anyway, tomorrow's the day we'll start seeing what happens. We may or may not actually get the ultimate result tomorrow, but at least we'll get an idea of what the real lay of the land is and what this spectacular turnout really implies. So if you like these videos, again, subscribe and give me a like and make any comments you have, and that'll be all for today.